Imagine a world where China annexes all of Asia, expanding its borders from the Pacific to the heart of Russia. What would this mean for the global balance of power? Let's dive into a world where China becomes the undisputed leader, with a total population exceeding 4.6 billion people, making up more than half of the world's population. Economically, this new superstate would dominate the planet with a GDP of around 39.7 trillion United States dollars, nearly 50% larger than the US, the current world leader. This economic powerhouse would bring together the strength of China, India, Japan, South Korea, Russia, and other Asian countries. From technology to manufacturing and natural resources, this empire would have the financial and industrial might to shape the world economy. In terms of human development, the HDI of the region would likely sit at around 0.76, benefiting from China's rapid development and the advanced infrastructure and education systems of countries like Japan, South Korea, and Russia. While still behind the US or Western Europe, the region would show strong strides toward improving living standards, healthcare, and education. Militarily, this new empire would possess the largest standing military in the world, with over 8 million active duty personnel, outmatching every other nation in terms of sheer manpower. It would have a massive military budget, outspending the rest of the world combined. Beyond its conventional forces, the newly unified Asia would also boast advanced nuclear capabilities, ensuring its dominance and making any confrontation with the empire a perilous endeavor. China's motivations for annexing Asia are multifaceted. First, there's the drive for economic dominance. For decades, China has steadily expanded its global influence through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, where China invests in infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and Europe. This has allowed China to secure vital trade routes and build economic leverage over smaller nations. Then, there's the desire for territorial expansion. China has long had disputes over territories like the South China Sea and Taiwan. Unifying Asia under one government would give China full control of vast resources and strategic landmasses. This expansion would give China the resources it needs to fuel its ever-growing economy, from rare minerals to fertile agricultural lands. Lastly, resource control is a key factor. As China's industrial growth accelerates, so does its demand for energy and raw materials. By annexing Asia, China would secure a monopoly over many of the world's critical resources, from oil in the Middle East to rare earth metals in Central Asia. And let's not forget about geopolitical strategy. A unified Asia under China's rule would allow the country to challenge Western influence, primarily led by the US and Nato. The potential to create a bloc that could counterbalance the West is a powerful incentive for China. So how could China accomplish such a monumental feat? The first method would likely be political influence. Through years of strategic investments and diplomacy, China has cultivated strong ties with numerous Asian nations. If it uses these connections to extend its control over these nations, it would only be a matter of time before China would start pushing for more direct influence, potentially turning them into satellite states or directly incorporating them into the empire. But political influence alone may not be enough. If smaller countries resist, China could turn to military force. China has one of the world's most powerful militaries, with 2 million active duty personnel, and is steadily expanding its technological and nuclear capabilities. In cases of resistance, China could deploy its military to intimidate or subdue any opposition. Countries like India, Japan, and Russia would likely resist, and some may not back down without a fight. These countries have large, capable military forces and would present significant obstacles to China's ambitions. Another key method would be economic coercion. China could impose trade sanctions or incentivize countries to join its empire through economic assistance. Countries reliant on Chinese trade, investments, or infrastructure would be increasingly pressured to align with China's political and territorial objectives. The annexation might not happen overnight, but through years of gradual influence, political maneuvering, and economic pressure. So how would the world react to China's move? The United States and NATO would likely view the annexation as a major threat to the global balance of power. The US could impose economic and military sanctions, targeting key industries like technology and manufacturing, think of companies like Huawei or TSMC, and cutting off critical trade routes for essential goods like oil and semiconductors. This would cripple the empire's economy, disrupting industries like electronics and technology, and isolating the empire from global financial systems. These sanctions could lead to inflation, currency instability, and a halt in technological innovation. The financial strain would likely spark unrest within the empire, making it harder for China to maintain control and pursue further expansion. Militarily, the US and Nato might also increase their presence in key regions like the South China Sea or Eastern Europe, potentially leading to direct military confrontations or standoffs with China's forces. This is where things get really interesting. Russia shares a massive border with China, and while the two countries have had a growing partnership recently, this could change in a heartbeat. Picture this. China's annexation of Asia could push Russia into a corner. Would Russia see this as a golden opportunity to align with China, gaining territorial influence and securing strategic advantages in Asia? Or, and this is a huge or, would Russia view this expansion as a direct threat to its own power, feeling encircled by a now vastly stronger China? The stakes couldn't be higher. Russia could either side with China to carve up Asia for itself, or it could turn against its neighbor, igniting a dangerous rivalry. The result? A volatile and unpredictable Russia, a powder keg of potential alliances, betrayals, or full-blown confrontation, which could change the course of global history. Asia, under a single banner, would be radically transformed. Economically, we'd see a unified market with enormous trade flows and efficiency. But this wouldn't be without trade wars and economic friction. Smaller countries that are absorbed might experience economic exploitation, with China taking a larger cut of their resources and economic output. Smaller nations may see their economies suffer as they lose autonomy, and they could be forced into economic dependency on China. Politically, the shift would be dramatic. Countries across Asia would lose their sovereignty. Nations with rich cultural heritages, from India to Thailand, would see their cultures eroded under a single Chinese-led governance system. Resistance movements would likely spring up in these countries, calling for autonomy and freedom from Chinese control. Major cities might see protests, and new revolutionary movements might emerge, trying to reclaim lost independence. The environmental impact could also be catastrophic. China's rapid industrialization has often come at the expense of environmental protection. If this expansion leads to large-scale resource extraction across the continent, we could see massive deforestation, pollution, and overuse of natural resources that would have devastating long-term consequences. Globally, China's annexation of Asia would drastically shift the balance of power. This would be the moment where the world would need to pick sides. Would the West form a coalition of democracies to counter China's authoritarian rise? World War III could become a real possibility as nations rally to either fight or ally with the new Chinese empire. We might see military confrontations in the South China Sea, Eastern Europe, or the Middle East. New alliances would form as countries look to secure their futures in this new global order. The European Union could align with the US to resist China's dominance. Nations in Africa and the Middle East, which might now be under Chinese influence, would have to choose between new partnerships with China or aligning with traditional Western powers. The UN would become a battleground for political ideologies, struggling to maintain order amidst rising tensions. While this scenario of China annexing all of Asia may seem far-fetched, it's a stark reminder of how the balance of global power is constantly shifting. The world we live in is more interconnected than ever, and one nation's move can have ripple effects across the globe. As tensions rise, we must ask ourselves, how do we avoid conflict and foster cooperation? What steps can we take to ensure peace instead of division? And speaking of annexation, have you ever wondered about Trump's vision of expanding the United States? Imagine what it would mean if Greenland and Canada became part of the US under his leadership. Click on this video to find out.